Ships made of ice? You've got to be kidding. All right, folks, gather around. Let's talk about World War II. You've got your tanks, your planes, your battleships, all pretty standard stuff, right? Now imagine someone pitching this. Let's build ships out of ice. You'd probably laugh, right? Well, that's exactly what happened. Except someone took the idea seriously, and that someone was about to unleash Pykrete upon the world. It sounds like something out of a Monty Python sketch, but this was a real thing. In the midst of global conflict, the British War Office entertained the utterly bonkers concept of constructing a fleet of massive aircraft carriers, made entirely of ice. You see, steel was in short supply, and the Allies desperately needed a way to combat German U-boats in the Atlantic. That's when a wacky inventor named Geoffrey Pyke entered the scene, armed with an idea so crazy it just might work. Now, Geoffrey Pyke wasn't your typical inventor. Picture a cross between Albert Einstein and Doc Brown from Back to the Future, with a dash of Willy Wonka thrown in for good measure. This guy was brilliant, eccentric, and always coming up with outlandish ideas. He once escaped from a German prison camp using a compass hidden in his shoe. He also tried to revolutionize education by teaching kids to read using his own phonetic alphabet. But Pyke's most audacious idea was undoubtedly the ice ship. Pyke's vision went beyond just freezing some water and hoping for the best. He proposed a new material called Pykrete, named after himself, naturally. This wasn't your average ice sculpture material, though. Pykrete was a super strong composite made by freezing water with wood pulp. Think of it as reinforced ice, capable of withstanding torpedo attacks and even artillery fire. Pykrete wasn't just some harebrained scheme. This stuff was surprisingly tough. It had a compressive strength comparable to concrete, making it far more durable than regular ice. Plus, it melted much slower. Thanks to the insulating properties of the wood pulp, Pyke even envisioned building these behemoths directly in the Arctic, using seawater and readily available sawdust. Think about it. Giant, unsinkable aircraft carriers, impervious to torpedoes, built from a material you could literally find in your backyard. It was crazy enough to work, or at least that's what Pyke and a few high-ranking officials believed. They even got Winston Churchill on board, who, let's be honest, was probably more amused than anything else. Section 4. A desperate time for Britain. Why ice ships seemed like a good idea. Now you might be wondering why on earth anyone would entertain this idea. Well, World War II was a desperate time. The Battle of the Atlantic was raging, and German U-boats were wreaking havoc on Allied shipping lanes. Steel, a vital resource for building warships, was in short supply in Britain. So the idea of a fleet of cheap, readily available ice ships, immune to torpedo attacks, must have seemed like a godsend. Plus, these weren't going to be your average dinghies. Pyke envisioned colossal vessels, each displacing over 2 million tons. These behemoths would dwarf even the largest existing aircraft carriers. They'd be armed to the teeth, with anti-aircraft guns bristling from their icy decks and bombers ready to take flight from their frozen runways. The sheer audacity of the idea was almost enough to make you believe it could work. Section 5. Habakkuk on ice. Building a prototype in Canada. Surprisingly, the project made it past the drawing board. Codenamed Habakkuk after a verse in the Bible about God's power over the sea, the project moved into the testing phase. A prototype, albeit a scaled-down one, was constructed on Patricia Lake in Alberta, Canada. Imagine the scene. A bunch of engineers and construction workers in the middle of nowhere, building a giant boat out of ice. It's the kind of thing that makes you question reality. This wasn't just some slapdash effort either. They incorporated a refrigeration system to keep the ice from melting and even experimented with different mixtures of Pykrete to find the strongest formula. They tested its resilience against explosives, fired bullets at it, and even drove trucks across its frozen surface. The results were promising, but the challenges were immense. Section 6. Meltdown, the end of Project Habakkuk. Despite some initial success, Project Habakkuk met a predictable end. Building a floating fortress of ice was more complicated than anticipated. The project faced logistical nightmares. Maintaining temperature was a constant battle. The scale was too daunting. Pykrete deformed over time. Advances in anti-submarine warfare reduced the need for ice carriers. The project was scrapped in 1943. The dream melted away. Project Habakkuk remains a testament to human ingenuity. Even the most outlandish ideas deserve a second look. Because believe it or not, this really happened.